Alright everyone, we start off today talking about Bidenflation. Unfortunately, the new number is out and it's not good. It did tick up, which I predicted would happen. Remember last month for I think April, they were crowing about the fact that it dropped by like 0.2 or 0.3. Oh, peak inflation is here, everything will be fine now. It's going to go on back down and don't worry, it'll be fine before too long. Biden, hail Biden. He's such an economic genius. Of course, that was a transitory lull in the inflation numbers. Now it's going to pick up more steam because what you've got now compacted in is damage done from the funny money spending of the so-called infrastructure bill. That hasn't even begun to show up yet. This is probably the foreshock to that. This is on top of the American Rescue Plan. This is on top of shortages caused mainly by lockdownerism. We've got continuing problems with supply lines now because China keeps locking down different port cities over and over again because of the coup. So you've got a little bit of a problem. And also, remember, as the midterms approach, it's entirely possible that certain fortified states will begin attempting to do the lockdown shuffle again. They'll be predicting another dark winter. And Biden right now, link in the description, archived of course, by the way, to this basic story. He came out the other day and said, well, yeah, the Putin price hikes are hitting everyone real hard. There are no Putin price hikes. It's impossible right now for any rise in costs with regards to anything other than fuel oil and give it to gas. Other than that, there's no effect whatsoever by what's happening in Russia. That will be felt. Again, I have predicted this. It will come true. Please make sure to have some backup staple grains and shit. Buy it now. Do not wait. Trust me on this one. That will begin showing up again. End of July, August through September. The harvest season. That's when the harvest season in the more temperate, cooler climates of the United States and Canada supply an enormous proportion of all the grain in the world. Supply an enormous proportion of all sorts of crops. Realize, fertilizer, which is being throttled and comes from Russia, a huge proportion of the world's fertilizer supply. That's being throttled right now. Right now, U.S. farmers are paying 2-3 times what they would normally pay for various fertilizers. It's really going to impact root crops. What is one really important root crop that's really grown in the United States, especially in the northwestern states, Idaho and shit? Sugar beets. I hate to tell you, but that sugar's in everything. What about nitrate fertilizer? What's corn in? Corn is in your gasoline. Biden bumping it up to 15% threshold for ethanol inclusion, by the way. It's your cereal. It's fed to the hogs. It's fed to the chickens. It's fed to the cows. It's fed to basically every known animal that's used for agricultural purposes. Goats probably eat some of it, although they're like a trash can. They'll eat basically anything. The price of meat, the price of sugar, the price of anything with corn syrup added to it, which is everything in the U.S., thankfully very little over here in the in the Netherlands and in Europe at large, it's going to be a huge boost to the price. Adding to that, not just the fertilizer, which is a mainline cost for farming, by the way. The fertilizer is a major cost. The other part is the harvester, the rototiller, all of these things, they use fuel. Diesel fuel, gasoline, etc. Those prices are higher. That'll be the Putin price hikes. That's not going to show up for a couple of months. Right now, what you've got are the Biden price hikes. And he's the only person responsible in some cases for some of this damage. Gas prices were already skyrocketing long before the invasion of Ukraine. It's hilarious to see Biden continue to resort to this line. It's clearly not working. Look at his polling. He's now several points below where Trump was at this point in his term. And Trump had the lowest approval of any modern president at that point in his term since polling began. Trump faced a constant headwind because the entire legacy media hated him. Biden's people literally coordinate with the legacy media and with big tech to put out fake economic news, such as blaming Putin for things that Putin is clearly not responsible for. Putin right now has a negligible impact because the U.S. Oil and gas supply is negligibly from Russia, insofar as that portion which is imported at all. Biden had a bigger role to play by canceling drilling leases, by regulating the fuel industry, by shutting down Keystone, etc., etc. There are refineries offline, if I remember correctly, as well. This is all Biden's fault at the moment. And people are noticing that. There's a reason why his approval is now slipped into the 30s. And that's in an aggregate that uses cherry-picked polls that favor Democrats heavily, because in some cases they're not trying to skew their data. It's just that they use a rolling system. So the last few elections turnout or turnout potential is actually figured into their math. And inadvertently, when you have a major shift towards the Republicans at the moment, in registration, in likely turnout in the congressional ballot, that's not accounted for. The current polling, only half of those polls even account for reality at the moment. I think that Biden's probably closer to 35 in his actual approval. Even that's on the high side. That's the result of, again, the nonstop fluff pieces and positive coverage of Biden and the nonstop hammering home of the January 6th crap at the moment. But people are starting to ignore it. By the way, this inflation is perilously close to the point that I've mentioned before, in which you go from just inflation, from the normal Bidenflation, which is bad enough. It's eroding wages, it's eroding savings. Biden has been even fact-checked by groups like Snopes and PolitiFact repeatedly on lying about the economy. Well, it's the fastest growing economy in the world. People have more savings now than before. Most people are fiscally comfortable. None of these things are true. They're all pants on fire fucking false. Insofar, even when the fact checkers are fact checking Joe Biden, of all people, you know that it's a pretty dire, considerable lie. They couldn't hide it. The fact is this. You're going to hit an inflation number in which the economy does cool down. People stop buying as much. You're not going to get a soft landing. What you'll get is higher unemployment because employers will have to cut jobs. If I'm an employer, let's say I have 100 employees, and demand for the product that we make, let's say we make sticks, hex, and hammer flags and mugs and shit like that, and people don't have the money to buy flags and mugs and shit anymore as much, and demand drops by 20% or something. And what am I going to do? I can shut some lights off, I can cut corners with worker safety and stuff, I can have a negligible impact on my operative costs doing that. Otherwise, the only thing I can really do is limit people's work hours, or I can lower wages, which, I'd get crucified for, the liberals who pretend that I was doing something terrible in price gouging, or I can cut workers. That's probably what I'm going to do. Well, 20% less stuff is going out. We need 20% less people in order to actually make and ship the product. So I'm sorry, but here's your pink slip. This is already beginning to happen. You already have significant layoffs in some companies, large corporations mainly especially. You've already had huge damage done by lockdownerism to small-town America's small business economy. Regional and small chains, ma and pa stores, a huge number of them already went out of business, reshaping the entire landscape of the U.S. economy. BlackRock and Vanguard are doing fine, but the small group that has 3 or 4 apartments in your hometown probably folded and sold to them. At this point, I can't even blame them. Who the hell would want to be a landlord? The government prevented landlords from even evicting tenants that weren't paying or were abusing their fellow tenants. At some point, something's got to give. This is Bidenomics. This is the dysfunction of effectively a less coherent version of Jimmy Carter. There is no other administration to blame. The LP New Hampshire, now, the Libertarian Party has gotten better since the Mises people took over. So kudos to them. You're finally actually being libertarian. But the New Hampshire Libertarian Party actually earlier today put out a little bit of fake news itself by saying that this was the Trump inflation that we're seeing. No, the Trump inflation already showed up at the end of Trump's tenure. He had already performed his bailout, his stimulus, and it showed up in the form of slightly elevated inflation towards the end of his term in office. Right now what we're getting is Bidenflation. The Putinflation will come in several months. That will drastically increase the inflation rate probably. Even if the damage done by Biden's freewheeling funny money spending begins to ebb away, the Putinflation will show up, and that is real. Then he can finally say Putin price hikes, by the way. When corn and pork and all of these other things are massively more expensive. It's a trickle-down system, Bidenomics is. The damage trickles down to basic goods, and then it trickles back up in the form of more complex goods. Easier, corn is grown. You got the fertilizer cost, the cost of harvest, etc., etc. So that price is amplified. The corn gets shipped. The shipping is more costly because diesel fuel is through the roof. you ship it to the stockyard where they feed the pigs, where they feed the cows. Now the price of meat has vastly expanded. Again, you're using gasoline, you're using diesel in the things that ship these things around, number one, and your basic agricultural good that's being used as livestock feed is now twice as expensive. What can the government do? The only thing that the government can do, and I oppose this completely, but I'm sure it's on the table for the Biden admin, would be to subsidize more farm subsidies. They already did increase them, by the way, to try to stall out the damage. Then you just get more inflation down the road about 6 months later. It would be even worse. Unfortunately, we're teetering on the precipice of stagflation, which would be the joblessness numbers start to rise in accordance with the inflation. That's likely. We're probably already in a recession. At the very least, we're on a brink of one. And the worst damage hasn't even been done yet. It's going to tear apart entire communities, and people don't even see it. It's like a thunderstorm is approaching, but there's a mountain there, so the people are blissfully unaware until 15 minutes away from when the lightning is coming down. They're all having a good time on the beach. They're not even going to have enough time to get fucking back home. They're going to be trapped in their car. There'll be so much chain lightning going on. And it'll be a scary time for a lot of people. Stock up. Don't let yourself become a victim of neoliberal globalist policies and all the other screwy shit going on right now. Get your goods now, the things that you can't go without, your basics. Rice, beans, fucking cornmeal, whatever you happen to like. You like baking? Lay in some extra flour and yeast. That's my best advice for everyone out there. That's about all. Peace out.